Hey everybody, it's Metamither back with another video. The WMD Skorpion is one of the most extreme modules I've ever seen. It's a 20 HP wavefolder which I've had the privilege of being able to play around with over the last few days. There will probably never be another wavefolder quite like this, and in fact I named it as one of my top 5 best of show from Superbooth 2025, which you can see here. The Skorpion took 5 years from concept to completion, so I just had to find out how something like this was made. Today, I bring you an interview with the chief engineer and creative behind WMD, William Mathewson.
We're super slamming busy, a lot of chaos going on right now. My personal life, so just going through like moves and Burning Man, and then trying to go back to normal life and get these designs done.
Yeah, trying to get this to market too, right? It's
yeah.
Where are we with it? Is it pretty much ready to go?
So Skorpion, I'm still here and there making little tiny improvements as I haven't closed the pre-order window yet and haven't placed the bulk order for the production. So I'm still making little tweaks, but I'm trying to be done with that very soon. So it's one of those things that you can keep working on and always find something to change. As a designer, it's like I need to let it, as an art piece, stop and be like, okay, it's totally done. But as an engineer, there's always something you can improve.
So before we get into the Skorpion module itself, can you just give us a little bit of background with WMD? And I know you have tons of experience as a performer, so how that sort of influences your decisions at the company.
Sure. So I started WMD in 2007. I was really more of a recording engineer apprentice at the time, and I'd had a long time hobby of electronics, and I was making pedals for bands that would come through the studio and would hang out, use the pedals on recordings. And then I started to design my own stuff, tweak circuits, and just kind of developed organically from like the year 2001-ish to 2007 as I was doing that. So I performed on saxophone as a jazz band guy, and then really found myself more liking the backside of the audio world, hanging out behind the scenes of things. Yeah.
And how did that lead to you starting WMD?
So it was the building pedals for bands and then playing around, tinkering in my garage, coming up with designs. I had a guitar teacher at CU Denver named Dave Devine, who helped me, kind of guided me into, hey, you should talk to this guy in LA who might buy some of these pedals. And I wasn't really taking it seriously. It was a hobby then. And then I contacted the guy who's like, yeah, I'll take 10. And that was Analog Haven. So I was like, oh, shit, okay, we have a little business. I can do that kind of on the side. And then as I sold him 10 of the Fat Man, the original envelope filter we did, I worked in the summer every evening on the Geiger counter. Had this idea, developed it, turned it into a thing, sent him one, and he was like, cool, I'll take 25. And then it was like off to the races from there. Made the 25. He sold them in a week. He ordered 50 more. I was like, oh, shit, okay, real deal. So here we go.
I mean, it was literally picking up exponentially,
Yeah.
like literally.
Yeah, it really did. In the early years, like I could not keep up with demand at all, and it was a really good thing. It was like organic growth. We advertised a little bit. I tried to get reviews in magazines. It was still like the old world pre-internet days, pre-social media for sure. So it was totally a different type of trying to get the word out. So a lot of it was through dealers.
Yeah, plus like modular hadn't really kind of taken off like it did like after the pandemic. So it was kind of like a completely different era, I remember going to shows and, I didn't really see modular for like a while, until like maybe mid 2010s or something like that. Maybe I saw, it being used more.
Yeah. So like in those early days, there were maybe 12 companies. It's like Make Noise, Harvest Man, Dope Fur, and then some of the like Analog Solutions, Analog Systems, and then you had 5U guys. And Sean Cleary at Analog Haven would talk to manufacturers, like people who are potentially going to make modules, so me being one of them. He offered me prepayment on 100 Geiger counters if I made a Eurorack version. And that's how I got started making Euro modules. So, because he invested in me and I did the design, and then I fell in love with modular synthesis. So I'd had some experience with it in college, but I'd never taken it seriously and hadn't heard about Eurorack until that point. So dug in and found that it was a lot more creatively freeing to design Eurorack modules than pedals. So I could add more knobs, whereas if I put more than 5 knobs on a pedal, they sold worse. If I put more knobs on a Eurorack module, it sold better. So
yeah, that's really interesting. And then take us up to more like the present day. Like you had kind of, I think it talked about it in the Perfect Circuit interview a little bit with the genesis of AMMT. And what's the status of that? Is that being dissolved, and are you continuing with WMD, or where are we with that?
Sure. So I'll walk you through a little bit of the background. In 2013-ish, I got my own pick and place, and I started to do contract manufacturing for other companies. And then 2015, we got a bigger machine, started to do a lot more contract manufacturing, and that became like the core of our business. Maybe 60% contracts, 40% WMD stuff. And then up until the pandemic and the parts shortage, that was really growing. Then the parts shortage caused, because I couldn't order parts and get them delivered in the next week, that was how the business was designed. So if I had to wait a year to lead time on parts, that's more conducive to having a single product. So it sunk the business from how it could operate. So we shrunk way down, got rid of all of that equipment, and I started to outsource things to being made in China. And then, so beyond that, I did shut WMD down and was planning on quitting and exiting synthesis altogether. But I wanted to keep some semblance of design going and try this other business model, which was going to be fully contract manufactured. We're just a design house. And so I brought in Alex and Mason and Matt from the original company, and we started AMMT. And we had a lot of breakfasts. They were great. We had a lot of good meetings. And we worked on these projects, or on one project in particular, which is Clutch. And we put a lot of time into it, but the way it was structured was nobody got paid until we sold something, and everybody had to go get day jobs in order to survive. So the motivation kind of slowly fell away, and we made some progress, but we never got all the way to the finish line with the Clutch under that structure. So at the same time, I didn't go get a different job. I kind of stayed with WMD, selling off old product, and kind of started to get it going again by spending time doing design on my own stuff and working on the new mixer. And so during that time, AMMT kind of existed and chugged along, but we made slow progress. And eventually I was like, hey guys, why don't we just make this a WMD module, and we'll still hold the same payment structure. You guys get paid out on royalties. So it's going to be branded WMD. It'll be more continuous. We're not going to do all the other stuff. Everybody has jobs. We don't have the time to do it. So we're staying with the essence of it, but moving forward with it under WMD because it's simpler.
It's a more recognizable brand. Obviously, you don't have to kind of start it from square one with all that stuff,
Yep. Yeah, exactly. We're not starting at square one. I was able to get the code from Mason and put a couple months into it and get it massaged to the point where it's really close to done. So we're really close on it. And then, everybody's still going to be paid out. So it's the same spirit. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's get into why we're here today. Let's talk about what inspired the concept of the Skorpion module. And was there a specific gap in the Eurorack system that you were kind of trying to fill, or kind of where did the whole genesis come from?
Sure. So Skorpion, let's see. I thought of that concept, and it wasn't from there's a hole in the Eurorack market place. It was from I have an idea and I want to explore it place electronically. And it's the core is a slew circuit. So think of make noise maths. And what can you do with that circuit if you put a whole bunch of control circuitry around it? And so you can have it follow waveforms. That's what it normally does. But if you have it reverse direction, you can build this waveform redrawing engine that you then have control over the rate, when it changes. And I have the concept drawing I can send you. We can drop it in here. And so it started from an exploration standpoint of I have this idea and I want to see if it's musically interesting. And it was, and the earlier versions had pretty stripped down interface, and I tried some things that didn't end up working and I didn't like. And then eventually massaged it to the place that it is now. But it started from the exploration of electronics category rather than trying to fill a marketing hole.
Did it start out much smaller, or was it kind of always this sort of grand design?
It was a little bit grand. It started out as 16 HP and had 6 different thresholds. So 6 sliders instead of 8, which it has now. Yeah, so it was a little bit smaller. I tried to pack more stuff in to how that worked, like more shape controls, and found that those weren't actually that interesting all together. So I stripped them all out and put just one shape control with a variable switch, so you can choose what is the shaping, what controls the shaping.
Did your experience with live performance play into this at all? Or was it just kind of, again, from that sort of base idea that you sort of had, I guess, as you were developing it, right? Because you are a performer and you perform with these things. Can you talk about that interaction?
Yeah. So the Skorpion prototype has lived in my personal performance case since late 2020 or early 2021. And I think I used it at a Freak Boutique in 2022. So that was... play with it a lot, but from a performance standpoint, it's at the early days, it was just a wave shapers, a nice way to add textural timbre differences as you're going through a bass line or a lead. It's really powerful in making sort of comb filtery-esque something where certain harmonics will dip away, other harmonics will come in a static way. And then if you make it animated, which was a later addition to the way it works, to the interface, it's really nice as a whole scene filling sound. I don't know if that quite answers your question, but it's more of a sound design tool than a purely performance-oriented thing. You can use it as a performance piece, just as a part of a single sound. Yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, It's at its core, it is. I'm thinking of it as this super insane wavefolder, right? So in that sense, it is kind of like a sound design tool.
Yeah, it's more of a sound design tool than our mixer or Metron or something is really
right.
Open-ended performance. This is open-ended. What can you do within a wavefolder? Yeah.
How do you develop these kind of prototypes to begin with? I have some footage of you kind of developing it in that software program, or sort of where does the rubber meet the road in terms of that sort of CAD layout to the actual electronics?
Gotcha. With this one, I started with a concept diagram, and it started with an early schematic of what do I think will make this picture happen in electronics? How do I make this idea into something real that then shows up on the oscilloscope as the thing that I thought it was? And does it sound good? That was Rev 1.0, was just seeing if it worked. And then procedurally, I would design it in the schematic, order the boards, and then we built them. We built the original prototype in-house then. And did that 4 different times, and just tweaked the interface slightly, tweaked the circuitry slightly. And then there's me wiring, cutting traces. That's a lot of it is I made mistakes, or I learned something different. It needs to work this way. I have an op amp that's inverted and it needs to be a non-inverting op amp. So changing it in circuit and doing so physically instead of waiting for another design phase and doing it in software. It's test it on the bench, and then write down the changes, and then for the next prototype round, you prove them. make sure you did it right.
Never having designed a module myself, like how do those errors manifest themselves? Like, do you just get like no sound, or do you just get like happy accidents, or like, does the thing start smoking, or like how does that work?
Yeah, great question. A lot of times it's no sound. It's like, oh, this, and you like look at it with the scope. So you probe all the different points in the circuit and figure out, where does the signal die? What did I do? And a lot of times it's something will clip out. It has too much gain, or it doesn't have enough gain, or it's going the wrong direction. So that's like the inverting versus non-inverting thing, which will usually end up causing something to just die in the circuit somewhere. But if the concept was good and the execution was poor, it's always fixable. And that's what I usually find with circuits like this is like, I had the idea right and I didn't think through it all the way until I got the thing physically and could see it and fix it. So, because the Skorpions, there's so much circuitry that it's not really simulatable to get like a really good knowing of what's happening until you get the physical thing.
Yeah, and then I guess from there you can use the scopes to sort of like dial in the range of the knobs and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you use the scope to like check that the slew rates are fast enough, or that it's actually wavefolding at the right points. And then, checking everything. There's always something that you can change when you're working on a product this complicated. I just have to choose when to stop designing, because on every single thing I've ever made, there's always something that I've learned that it can be improved. But it's a piece of art, so it has to be stopped. It's not really like engineering perfection is not the goal. It's making something cool, and knowing when to stop is part of that.
Yeah, it's like maybe at a certain point you get like law of diminishing returns, right? Like that, the changes that you're making maybe just won't even be appreciated or heard at a certain point, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this took like 5 years to make, right? From concept to creation. What were the sort of biggest challenges that you ran into?
So biggest challenges were I had it in a basically all analog format where the sliders did one thing, and it was just controlling the thresholds. That was version 1 through version 4. And the biggest challenge that I had was I wanted the sliders to do more than one thing. So instead of them being in the analog domain, I had to make them digital. So the version now has a microcontroller with 8 sliders as inputs and 24 DAC outputs that control. So it's 24 divided by 3 for the 8 sliders. So control 3 different pages of parameters. And so figuring out how to fit all that additional circuitry onto the board was a challenge, and how to design it and then write all the code to do that was like mentally a big step. Once I actually started it, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. It was just a lot of design time, fitting it all onto the board and making sure that the schematic was right. And I think it's around 1,200 components. It's a lot of parts. So fitting all that physically on the board and having it be makeable was a challenge.
Yeah, and also you probably wanted to constrain yourself somewhat as far as like the size of it, right? I mean, 20 HP is large, but it makes sense for this kind of module, right? So, I guess you could have just kept going, but then you probably would run into like, okay, well, this thing's going to be like way too much to buy and stuff. So, I feel like all these kinds of things are really interplaying, right, when you're making this.
Yeah, 100%. It was, how do I make the thing that I want to make that's cool and also still marketable? And it's a balance of like not letting every feature you think of fit into it, like feature creeping forever. And how do I also not strip so much away that it really lets you explore, and it's not just a like, oh, set it, forget it, super easy module. I wanted something really deep that challenges the user to always create something different should they want to. Yeah.
from a design philosophy standpoint, right? Like there's no reverb on this thing, right? So it's kind of like staying true to that one core idea of this is what it is and this is also what it's not, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. How much control can I give a user that's like reasonably good control that you would want to have that's not superfluous in just a wave folder that allows the user to make as many different sounds as possible with a fun user interface. That was the design philosophy goal.
So for someone stepping onto this, like, how would you suggest that, you know, day one, somebody approach this and start patching with it?
So for day one to start patching, I would say start with the input and the output, keep it really simple, and just learn the interface. The biggest suggestion is if someone has an oscilloscope, to use it with it, because it looks really cool, but also you really understand what the module is doing if you have that oscilloscope.
We obviously use our ears, but sometimes visually you can kind of understand what the sound looks like, so it can kind of like inform you and educate you as to what the module's doing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Alex has done the videos mostly with an oscilloscope that we've had or put out on YouTube so far, and I think that's really helpful for users. At least for me, my mind is very visually oriented, so like I can translate between what I hear and what I see very well. So it's helped me develop the module, and then it helps me explain how it's working.
How did you approach designing the sort of modulation engine and the sort of internal routing that's possible with it?
Yeah. All right. So when I moved from the sliders just do one thing to we have all these digital to analog converters doing the same thing, it opened up for, well, if I'm having these static DACs, I have this microcontroller, I could add some LFOs. And one of the cool things was like just moving the sliders up and down during a performance and like lightly modulating the different thresholds. So I was like, well, what if I did 8 LFOs, can easily run that on the micro. It's free now that the micro and the DACs are already on there. It's just coding time. So I experimented with that and found that I really liked it. So then it was, how do we make it a simple for the user thing to like add all this animation? And it's, well, let's add a gate input, and then that controls every bit of internal modulation is from a single gate input. So you have macro control. So there's like one master envelope that controls the level of all the LFOs, and then you have the hardware LFOs. So like I wanted it to be easy to patch, and then really vibrant results was the goal.
Nice.
Yeah.
You talked about the parts shortage a little bit before. Maybe you could comment briefly on how that affected work on the module and perhaps the ongoing tariff situation.
Sure. So with the parts shortage, I started the design of this in 2020, and some things were available. I didn't know the number I was going to make, but when I was prototyping, I bought full reels of parts because they were available. And then I tried to use as many parts that I already stocked and used for other products, which is just good design practice anyway. So I ended up using a microcontroller that we've used on Carbon, and it's not powerful enough to do everything on this module. So I had to like hack in extra ports and pins to make it really function well. And it ended up working out okay. It's just, it took a lot more software development time to get it to work because it's a little hacky, but it functions and I have the parts in stock. So like I knew I could make the product whenever it was done. The original plan was that this would be done in like 22 or 23, and it didn't transpire that way. So how did the part shortage impact the design? Is I couldn't add things that I couldn't get. So I had to keep the low-end microcontroller. I had to use like simple and standard op amps, not use anything too like new or crazy. And then like certain switches, there's a lot of CMOS switching parts on there, and I had to use just what I had in stock at the time. Now you can get everything again, but from design at that time, it was like really restrictive to just using what was in my parts library and stock shelves already. So the upside is that I have all these parts already to make this thing. Not all of them, but a lot of the parts. The downside is that since we're not doing our own manufacturing in-house, I'm shipping the parts to China and then paying an import tariff when they come back, when the whole board comes back. Yep.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's such a ridiculous situation, but we're all hoping that it kind of gets resolved sooner than later.
Yeah.
In addition to that, were there any sort of compromises or sort of complexity constraints? I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit before that, but I think part of it is being true to the base design, but is there anything that you wanted to include but sort of didn't because of space or these other considerations?
Actually, no. There were things that I had included that I stripped off, but like parts didn't impact those choices too much. It was like really just what does the design need and how do I make it happen? And most of those questions are answered in op-amp circuits. So just adding the right op-amps and more of them typically, and then finessing the circuit until it sounds the way I wanted it to. So one of the later additions was this mid-side matrix, because I wanted it to be a stereo module. And I looked at, well, what if I ran 2 slews and did a fully independent stereo module, and that would have added way too much complexity, cost, and heat from all the extra circuitry. Power consumption is an important thing on these too. Like you don't want a small module that uses crazy amounts of power, because then people can't use it in their cases. They overpower their cases. So it's important to like keep heat under control. I ended up compromising and adding the mid-side matrix, a high-pass filters and low-pass filters, so that basically how it works is it splits the signal into low-pass, and that stays in the center. And then high-pass signal gets processed by a delay and by the non-delay, and then that gets added to just the sides. And so as you turn up the wet, dry, wide control, it goes from dry to mono, fully wet, and then opens up the stereo field. It's a really great effect.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of like learning it myself, so I definitely want to check that out. And I'll be looking at Alex's videos for sure, probably a couple of times.
Yeah.
Where was the sort of again, when the rubber sort of hit the road, like where were you really struggling with developing the module, or like what sort of took the longest?
Yeah, what took the longest was that phase between when it was just the sliders doing one thing to the sliders doing 3 things. So there was the circuitry that I had to design to make that work. I had to completely relay out the module. I started from scratch with the layout. That's when it went from 16 HP to 20 HP. I added 2 sliders, and that process took about 2 years because I didn't work on it constantly. I was also dealing with like personal life problems, and like the WMD shutdown was in the middle of that. So I became demotivated for a while and then eventually came back to it. But it was a difficult and time-consuming thing to do. So like I mentally shut it out for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, self-care is like a real thing. And, sometimes when it's like you can't just like push it, like there's going to be a breaking point at some point,
Yeah, I've definitely experienced burnout off and on with WMD for years. I think before I even knew the term burnout. But yeah, that's one of the things that led me to shut it down. It's too fucking daunting sometimes. Too much going on, and you just lose motivation and can't keep going. So You got to stop and take care of yourself.
Yeah, like some people think that true art is sort of gained out of like massive struggle, but I actually think like the total opposite. Like you have to be in like a really, really good headspace to do something like art, and this is definitely part of that. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah. So like freeing up is, it sounds kind of weird to talk about, but like freeing myself up from managing 20 people gave me a lot of peace in my personal life. I wasn't doing HR bullshit and like managing opposing personalities and trying to keep the peace and also deal with people not working at the shop because we're in the middle of the pandemic. So like the shutdown gave me a lot more time and mental peace to want to work on things. So I also like during some of the pandemic was drinking a lot, and I got sober about 3 years ago, and that also, while it made my life more boring, it opened up the time that I have to work on things that really matter instead of burning it at bars late at night doing nothing and having meaningless conversations that I forgot, right? So like those changes made a big difference in wanting to work and make art again. And so I started making more music then and started to really dive deeper into these more complicated modules and designs and like have the motivation to finish them. Yeah.
Yeah. As far as like when you were sending out the modules to some beta testers, did they have any sort of feedback that led you to changing the design or modifying it in some way?
For the Skorpion, so for different modules, we've done different things with beta testers. For like the digital modules, like the drums, we got a fair amount of feedback from our internal beta team. For Skorpion, I don't really care too much about other people's opinions on it. It's a piece that's like my art, and so I'm not taking a ton of feedback. Maybe some UI feedback, but most of what I've gotten is like it's too complicated. And that was the early versions. So that's when I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to finish this and I'm going to make it my thing. So, and I've been honing the interface, and it's a lot less of a too complicated module now that it's one knob for function for the most part. So, but for this, it's been like more of a my world, my design. I'm going to make this and not listen to other people's opinions. Whereas something more functionally requiring, like Metron or the drum modules, those need to behave in certain ways. So beta test information is a lot more important to take seriously. So,
yeah, that makes sense. I almost see it as like this experimental module. It's larger than a lot of wavefolders, so it's sort of like in a class of its own. So it's sort of almost like this experimental piece in a sense.
Yeah, 100%. It's experimental. It's art. It's not supposed to be it's not recreating something that exists. It's trying to do something new and in a new way. So because of that, I don't need feedback because I have to come up with what it is supposed to be in the first place.
Yeah, it's like a new paradigm, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, there's, if you were making a reverb, right, there's kind of like really good examples of reverb that we could kind of point to, or like drum modules, right? Like this kind of stuff. But this, again, is kind of like its own thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some other modules that you found that like pair really well with the Skorpion?
So in the development process, I've mostly been using a saw wave or a triangle wave or a sine wave, and like around 80 to 120 hertz for testing, and that's about it because that allows me to see what the module is doing. So in playing, running program material through it, so running like a bass line through it, can really overpower a mix because it adds a shitload of harmonics, but that can be great. So if used like sparsely, or, if you don't have like a constant line going, if you have just little bits and you are meticulous about not overpowering and not having too much going on, then using program material through it can be really great. And then we've experimented with some drums going through it, which is an amazing sound. So wavefolded drums, usually too noisy, but this doesn't wavefold in the same way, so it can be a little bit more tame and a little bit more controlled. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. As far as like effects, like imagine like kind of smearing it with some reverb or potentially some delay might really like kind of, on the other end of it, as opposed to the sound sources, that could be really interesting.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, everything sounds a little better with reverb and delay on it.
Sure.
So as long as you don't overdo it and have like too much of a wash that you can't tell any of the sounds apart.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, you could maybe make some like kind of like doomy kind of sounds with like, just kind of that hall reverb or something. I don't know. I'm just kind of like just ideating about how I could play with it, So when is Skorpion available now, or where can people get it? When is it coming out?
Great question. Thank you. We are doing we're doing a limited run of Skorpions. I'm doing one order, and I am taking pre-orders currently. And I'm closing pre-orders on October 8th. So whatever number we get, I'll probably run like 5 or 10% over that. And then that's it. And I'm only going to do this one run. I'm not going to run this thing again. It's very expensive to make it. And it's one of those pieces that I don't want to deal with stocking it because it's expensive and the carrying costs are high. So I want to make it, sell them all, and then move on to the next thing, and not worry about like keeping this as an evergreen product. So
what is the next thing? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So there's a couple next things that are imminent, and that's Clutch, which is coming very, very soon. And then Cosmic Debris, which is a collaboration with Nick Donaldson from Infrasonic Audio. That'll be like early next year or late this year or something like that. And then beyond that, we have meetings to figure out what the next thing is. So I don't have a total clear design yet or I can't really say what the next thing is, but I want to clear my plate for that next thing.
All right, cool. Definitely looking forward to that. William, man, thanks so much for taking the time. I mean, for me, like, this is like totally crazy, interesting module. And I was really looking forward to like talking to you about this just because I want to like know how it's made, and stuff like that. So yeah, thanks again for taking the time, man.
Yeah, Tristan, thank you so much for having me and for all the curiosity about the module. It's really fun for me to explain and like go deep into some of the background on this thing. So I'm really proud of the design, and it's taken a long time, and I'm super stoked to get it out into the world and let people make music with it finally.
Awesome, man. All right, I'll talk to you soon. See you next time.
Sounds good. Yeah, cheers. Thank you.
See ya.
Yep.
I hope you enjoyed that deep dive into what went into making the WMD Skorpion, and more broadly have gained an appreciation for how a module goes from concept to completion. Orders are now open for the Skorpion over at WMD's website, and I'll put the link in the description. And please consider subscribing to this channel if you haven't already. See you next time.